Okay, this video looks at NICRA, and when we're looking at NICRA, you need to look at the aims of NICRA, how successful it was, and how people reacted to it. Well, firstly, looking at NICRA, by looking at its aims, we can look at why NICRA was set up. So, I always use the memory phrase, "Oh God, John Hume is a super babe," as a way of remembering the aims of NICRA. Okay, so we have our aims here. So they wanted the setting up of an ombudsman, and this ombudsman would investigate allegations of discrimination in jobs and housing. Catholics in particular had been complaining for years that they had been discriminated against in those areas, and this ombudsman would be used to investigate those claims. They wanted an end to gerrymandering. Gerrymandering had meant that places like Derry, for example, even though they had a nationalist majority in the city, they had always elected a unionist council. And nationalists claimed that this had been deliberately organised by the unionists, that they had drawn the council boundaries in such a way that the unionists would always win. They wanted an end of discrimination in jobs. They wanted fair allocation of council houses. It was the councils who allocated the houses, and these houses, therefore in Derry, as an example, the council houses were being allocated by a unionist-run council. And the unionist-run council ensured that most houses went to unionists because every person with a rent book was entitled to vote in council elections. So really, when you were giving someone a house, you were giving them a vote. And therefore, Catholics believed that the council was deliberately not giving them houses to stop them getting votes in council elections. Catholics also wanted an end to, NICRA wanted an end to the Special Powers Act. The Special Powers Act allowed the RUC to arrest and detain people without trial, and many believed that this power had been used exclusively against Catholics in the 50 years that the Unionist Party ruled Northern Ireland. The B Specials were a part-time police force, an armed part-time police force made up of almost exclusively of Protestants. And again, NICRA called for the disbanding of this organisation, believing it to be sectarian. Certainly the B Specials were notorious for within the Catholic community as a organisation which they feared and hated. So those were the aims of NICRA, and in that you get the reasons why NICRA developed as well, because they developed because of all the discrimination and gerrymandering that they saw within Northern Ireland. I suppose you could also say that NICRA was influenced by the Black Civil Rights Movement, which was happening in America around about the same time under Martin Luther King, and also events in Paris and Europe at this time where students were protesting for rights and equality and so on. Right, so how do people react? If we look at government reactions, first of all, the first march that NICRA held in August 1968 from Coal Island to Dungannon passed off peacefully. However, you can see some of the government reaction in the way that it stopped the march from reaching its destination. There you see closed off the road, and the march stopped, and there was a bit of name calling maybe, but very little else happened at that. That march was led by Austin Curry, who famously led the Caledon squat, where they squatted in houses and complained about how Dungannon Council was allocating its houses. Things changed in October 1968 with the Derry March. This was the march that was baton charged by the police, and those images were sent around the world because there was an RT camera crew there. That march was banned by William Craig, who was the Home Affairs Minister, who later goes on to become leader of Vanguard. And the RUC were instructed to use their batons to break up the march. And the violence of that march is a real turning point in the Northern Ireland history, Northern Ireland's history. Following that march, there was quite a lot of violence in terms of riots and so on in nationalist areas of Northern Ireland. And the government reacted to that by introducing the 5-point plan. Now, I always describe this or remember this by the phrase O'Neill's solution to problem Catholics and violence. And here's what O'Neill in the 5-point plan promised. He promised an ombudsman to look at cases of discrimination. He wouldn't do away with the Special Powers Act, but he proposed changes to it. He would bring in a point system for housing, so the more points you got, the more the likelihood that you would have of getting a house. Dairy Corporation, which was hated by nationalists, was to be replaced by a development commission. And the multiple votes that business owners got in council elections were gone. However, this was not one man, one vote. Okay, so it wasn't everything that the civil rights organisation had wanted. There were other reactions as well. If you look at unionist reactions, some moderate unionists sympathised with NICRA, and some unionists actually joined NICRA at the beginning. NICRA, was seen as an apolitical, not apolitical, but non-sectarian organisation which unionists could join, and some unionists did. However, many unionist politicians believed that NICRA were troublemakers and they were trying to destroy Northern Ireland, and they were very fearful of the groups that were involved, and many believed that in the background that there was members of the IRA and Republican sympathisers involved there in the background. In sources that we've read in class, some Protestants complained that NICRA was only interested in Catholic rights. Protestants felt that they too had bad housing and they too struggled to get jobs, and that it wasn't just Catholics who felt the pinch in the 1960s in Northern Ireland, and they felt that NICRA was only concerned about Catholics, not concerned about them. If you're looking for an extreme reaction, Ian Paisley called NICRA a front for the IRA. He made no bones about what he thought NICRA was about. NICRA was trying to destroy Northern Ireland and bring it down. So he led counter-protests, and these counter-protests often led to violence between the NICRA marchers on one side and Paisley's opposition groups on the other. Now, just to take things a wee bit further, NICRA called off OFF their marches at the end of 1968 for a number of reasons. First of all, they were disturbed by the violence that had come after the 1968 march, but also they were encouraged by the 5-point plan that O'Neill was now promising them. Okay, so that seems to be enough for NICRA to actually decide, let's call a halt to the marches. However, we get the arrival of a new group, this group People's Democracy. And these are much more radical young students who they vow to continue the marching. People involved with People's Democracy were Emma McCann, Michael Farrell, Bernadette Devlin, people like that. And they say that they're going to continue marching, and they organise a march to run from Belfast to Derry in January of 1969. And that march and the attack on it at Burntollet have been described as the match at the Prairie Fire, because after that the violence got worse. In 1969 we have the summer of 1969 and the Battle of the Bogside and the burning of Bombay Street, and then eventually the introduction of British troops in August 1969, and then the arrival or the emergence of the Provisional IRA. Okay, that'll do us there. Well done if you've lasted this long, and best of luck on your exam.